Bibliophiles of the internet, today I'm here to talk about some heist books. I got this idea from CW of the Quiet Pond, who wrote a fantastic blog post that was called Diverse Heist Books That Are Not Six of Crows. I thought that was a fantastic premise and I wanted to add to it, so I will have CW's post included down below. There is going to be a tiny bit of overlap between us, but only because a couple of these books and authors are definitely good enough to mention twice. I don't have a great catch-all phrase to describe this list. I don't want to use diverse because I know it can be a bit contentious, but I was intentional while curating this list in trying to find heist stories that center marginalized characters in some way. And also to give a loose definition of what constitutes a heist, my thinking in terms of this video is that a heist story is one where the characters have to undertake a dangerous mission, especially something that involves stealing something or duping someone, and it usually requires illegal activity, disguise, stealth, and/or deceit. I think you'll catch on to what I mean pretty quickly, so let's just jump right in. We are going to start with a series that made me want to make this video, and that is, of course, The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. I can never find a simple way to describe this book, so I apologize, but it's a YA historical fantasy trilogy that takes place during the late 1800s in France. The idea is based on the creation myth of the Tower of Babel, which is a story about a tower that was built up to the heavens and was eventually struck down by God. When the tower was broken, its pieces were scattered all across the world and were said to become the different cultures and languages that we know today, and if those pieces were to be reunited, it could potentially unleash some very dangerous magic. There's a highly secretive organization known as the Order of Babel who are broken up into houses, and those houses collect ancient artifacts and articles of creation and also protect those recovered Babel fragments. Our main cast of characters are highly skilled treasure hunters who are working both for and against the Order to make sure those pieces don't fall into the wrong hands. In the first book, the Order solicits their leader Severon to help them recover a missing artifact of great importance, and in return they promise to restore his rightful inheritance as a patriarch of one of the Order's houses. As I always do, I will point out that this series has representation for characters who are biracial, Algerian, Haitian, Indian, Filipino, Jewish, queer, and autistic. The Gilded Wolves has slowly but surely become my entire personality. I read the first book in December, and I have now completed the trilogy by the time you're watching this. This series just offers such a unique and powerful reading experience. Every installment perfectly blends decolonial history, mythology, fairy tale-inspired imagery and prose, and absolutely dynamic elements of emotion, found family, and romance. These books are angsty and gut-wrenching and seductive, but they also have these really compelling mysteries and cons at the center that underscore the story with suspense and that continuously raise the stakes. There's riddles and puzzles and death traps and masquerades and secret identities. The drama, the action, and the emotion are second to none. This series truly has everything you could want in a heist. Next up we have The Queer Principles of Kit Webb by Cat Sebastian. This is a queer historical adult romance. It follows a retired and reformed thief named Kit who now owns and operates his own coffee shop, and his only goal is to live out a quiet existence. However, those hopes are dashed when a haughty and eccentric noble named Percy tracks him down and tries to hire him to steal a very important, very well-guarded book. Kit refuses the job, but Percy is infuriatingly persistent, so eventually Kit agrees to instead teach this attractive, insufferable noble everything he needs to know to pull off this heist on his own. I love this story because you kind of get a little bit of everything. There's an underlying heist that the characters are building up to, and you get to see the preparation that goes into that, but at the same time there's also a really fun and sexy slow burn romance between two complete idiots. And not only is he queer, but it's also worth noting that Kit is a disabled man as well. He lives with chronic pain and uses mobility aids from time to time, but most importantly, he did not retire from thieving because of his disability, but rather by choice. You really can't go wrong with this book. It has incredible banter, endearing characters, that underlying suspense and action, and a heist that boils down to eating the rich. What's not to like? Next, I have to talk about Nocturna by Maya Montaigne. It's a YA high fantasy story set in a Latina-inspired world, and it follows a face-changing thief and a dangerously impulsive prince. Finn is the face shifter, and she is a very talented and sought-after thief, but she's cornered by a powerful mobster who's forcing her to steal a legendary treasure from the Castellan Palace under threat of losing her magic. Prince Alfer is the Prince of Castellan whose older brother tragically passed away, and now in his grief as he's struggling to find his place as the only living heir to the kingdom, he is desperate to somehow bring his brother back, even if it means resorting to forbidden magic. The two of them run into each other while Finn is robbing the palace, and they accidentally unleash a terrible ancient magic that could very well destroy the world as they know it. It's a super fun, fast-paced, magical, twisty story that definitely captures all of those heist highlights. You have a thief who can change her appearance, who's infiltrating the palace, but not only that, then you have this reluctant duo who are trying to break into these very highly guarded facilities. It's one of those setups where the characters only get one shot to pull this off, and everything has to go exactly right or else the fate of the world is at stake. There's a sort of enemies to lovers dynamic between Alfie and Finn as well, but then there's even more tension because both characters are being driven by their own motives and they could very easily jeopardize the mission at a moment's notice. It's thrilling, it's unique, it has great characters and setting. I will take any chance I get to recommend this book. Going back to adult fiction, we have an upcoming book called Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee that I'm very excited about. It's an Ocean's 11 type narrative inspired by the true story of Chinese art mysteriously disappearing from Western museums. It follows, I believe, an all-Asian cast led by Will Chen, who's a very accomplished senior at Harvard who studies art. A shadowy Chinese corporation reaches out to him with an impossible job offer to locate 5 priceless Chinese statues that were taken from Beijing and to steal them back. So Will assembles his team with a public policy major, a pre-med student, a hacker, and an engineer who races cars. If they succeed, they will earn themselves $50 million and the chance to make history, but if they get caught, they will lose every facet of the American dream that they have worked so hard to gain for themselves. I literally have this book queued up on my devices as we speak. I intend to read it very soon, and when it dropped into my inbox and I read the description, I was like, this is very much my shit. What really appeals to me about this story is the opportunity to critique colonialism and how museums function within a colonialist framework to uplift and almost romanticize the legacy of conquest. And because the story is going to be told from a very specific Asian perspective, I'm also curious to see if it's going to explore the model minority myth and the toxic effects of the American dream, especially how it's perpetuated within Asian American communities and perhaps how that affects these characters. But also on a superficial level, I just think it's going to be badass to see how these characters take that high level of skill and knowledge that they've been able to access and then turn around and use that against the very system that was supposed to grant them success. Honestly, the more I talk about this book, the more I want to read it, and I think it's an upcoming release that more people should be really excited for. Speaking of Asian-centered heist stories, I could not make this video without bringing up The Want Duology by Cindy Pon. It's a futuristic YA dystopian story set in Taipei where pollution and viruses have made the atmosphere highly volatile and toxic. The rich and powerful have developed these high-tech biosuits that can filter out the air and extend a person's life significantly. However, they're extremely expensive and the most vulnerable communities can't afford to get them, and this has created a very stark class division between yos and meis. To be yo is to have, and to be mei is to want. The main character, Jason Zhao, is on a mission to infiltrate JinCorp, the corrupt manufacturer of these suits, by passing himself off as a yo so that he can prove this company is also the cause of all this pollution in the first place. I read this duology about 3 or 4 years ago, and I still think about it to this day, which I think speaks volumes about this series. Especially with the pandemic and how it's proven that healthcare access, testing, and preventative resources are often privileges reserved for those who can afford it, it makes me think about how this story was absolutely ahead of its time. This is an elaborate techno heist that centers environmentalism and that offers action, social commentary, enemy seduction, and a decidedly non-Western viewpoint. It is absolutely worth the read. Going back to queer heist stories, I also wanted to highlight Spellhacker by M.K. England. I think M.K. England is criminally underrated, and I will take any chance to recommend their books. This one is a blend of sci-fi and fantasy set in a world where magic, known as Maz, is a tangible natural resource. But after an earthquake unleashed a magical plague, corporations came in to control the Maz market and significantly hike up the prices. That's why Diz and her friends run a very lucrative, very illegal Maz siphoning business. Before they retire from their life of crime and go their separate ways, they have to finish up just one last job. But things quickly go wrong when they accidentally discover a new strain of Maz that is incredibly powerful and dangerous, and they find themselves on the run from those who would seek to control it. Before I forget, this book has queer characters, it has a non-binary love interest, and I believe that character also has an autoimmune disorder, so there's a little bit of representation for chronic illness. I really love M.K. England's brand of sci-fi. It's funny, it's chaotic, it's full of vibrant characters who make up these band of misfits who accidentally have to save the world, and it makes for some really unique and entertaining stories. This story especially has a really interesting take on found family in that it explores how found families are not inherently perfect just because they're made by choice. The world building is super fun as well. It's a really distinct blend of sci-fi and fantasy elements in a way I haven't seen before, and I think that brings something special and unexpected to this heist. And I think I'm going to close for today with Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. This is adult crime fiction about a black character named Bug who is a humble car mechanic once known as the best getaway driver on the East Coast. After a series of financial pitfalls only further exacerbated by the pervasive racial prejudice in his small town, Bug decides to accept one last job in a diamond heist that will finally solve all his financial worries. But when things go horrifically wrong, Bug is sucked into a grimy underworld that threatens to destroy everything and everyone he cares about. I've sampled a couple of chapters of this in the past. I haven't really sat down to read it back to front yet, but I've heard tons of good things about this author, his work, and especially this book. A lot of people say that this is like Fast and the Furious, but in adult fiction form, and I can definitely confirm from what I've read that it starts out going 100 miles an hour and it does not let up off the gas. It's gritty, it's voicey, it's intense, there's a lot at stake for the main character, and I think it's really going to comment on how corrupt societal systems marginalize folks and force them to make tough choices that are not really choices. This has been high on my TBR for quite some time, and I don't see a ton of people talking about it, which is why I decided to bring it to the table, so to speak. So those are just a few heist books for your shelves. I actually had a much longer list to start with, so maybe once I compile and read even more, I can make another installment. If you read any of these books yourself, or if you know any more heist books that fit the bill, I would love to hear from you in the comments. But that's everything I had to share for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!